Hi, I'm Christina, and this is Desert Agave Fiber Arts, Episode 7. I am a writer since as long as I can remember, a fiber artist as of about 3 to 4 years now, and I am also Latinx, bipolar, recently self-diagnosed ADHD and autistic, and then I am also have a recent diagnosis of PTSD. So when I'm here, I talk mostly about fiber arts, but also a little bit about mental health and how fiber arts helps me to navigate and improve my mental health, and anything else that I think is important, but mostly fiber arts because those are the podcasts I love to watch, and I am trying to participate in the community by making one that I hope some of you will find comfort with. And with that, another thing I've been doing recently is I have started doing yoga over Zoom. And then, despite barely knowing what it is, I signed up to do yoga therapy with the same instructor. And it's been enormously helpful. And one of the things I've learned from her is about how to calm down the body and to make your body feel safe. And a couple little tricks that I literally use many times a day right now, because there's all sorts of reasons why I'm not feeling safe, and I bet that's true of a lot of you as well, is that when you are not safe, your body tries to be very small and it tries to be very quiet. So one way to signal to your body that there's not a bear in the room right now, even though you might be worried about some things, in this immediate moment you are safe, is you can take a big noisy breath and also take up a lot of space while you're doing it if you want. So I'm going to do that right now, and I would love it if you would do it with me. So deep breath in. I feel better. I hope you do too. I have taught this trick also to my husband and my son, and literally there are days lately where you can hear a chorus of deep, noisy breaths all over the house coming from one or the other of us. It's really been helping all of us to stay calm and therefore to remain useful. That's really been one of my mantras lately, is what can I do that is useful? And one of the things I can do that is useful is I can stay mentally well, because when I'm mentally well, I can fight for the things that I think need to be fought for. And along those lines, I've seen some podcasts lately, especially based in the US, mentioning politics and sort of apologizing for it because they know that people often see podcasts as a way to escape stressful things. And then I've seen many, many, many podcasts where, based in the US, where politics are just never mentioned. And I'm not going to talk about politics for the whole hour. That doesn't sound useful. I don't think I have new perspectives particularly. But I am going to say that for me, fiber arts podcasts are also a bit of a respite, a bit of an escape. But for me, they really only feel like a respite if they feel like a safe place for me to be. And as a woman who is a woman of color, who has a disability, if I don't know where you stand on the political landscape right now, then I might not feel safe with you. So the reason why I am talking about this briefly now is because I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. And I want you to know that if you are horrified by fascism, if you are horrified by the things going on right now, if you believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, disability rights, trans rights, all those things, this is a safe place. I'm not going to talk about it the whole time, but this is a place where all of those are core values. And welcome. I hope that you find comfort as I talk about my projects, which have been bringing me comfort and which have been useful, because it's the mental health that I achieve through pursuing my art allows me to do things like call my representatives and my senators. Tomorrow I plan to go to a town hall for the school board to talk in favor of all sorts of people who I think need to be protected right now. I have plugged more deeply into my own life, meaning I'm reaching out to people who I think need to be reached out to, who I think I can offer support to in some way. I've also signed up for a much larger volunteer role with my Progressive Unitarian Universalist Church, and in that way I'm trying to support my church and the progressive work it does in the community. I'm just trying to look at my own life and my own opportunities and talents and try to figure out how I can put those things to work and be of use to the world to try to make the world a better place. And with that, I'm going to move on to knitting. All right, I'm wearing a finished object. Maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't. This is the Blossom sweater, designed by Anne Valley. The yarn is hip strings. It's a Targu worsted. I bought it on sale because the hip strings dyer had decided to move on from the space for a while, so they were trying to sell what they had left of it. And there was a bunch of cool looking colorways, variegated as you can see, and most of them did not have a sweater quantity that would work for my size. But in this color, which is called Prose, which is perfect because I mostly write prose, there were 6 skeins. And I knew that 6 would be enough to do a Blossom by Anne Valley. My size actually on top calls for 5 skeins, but I knew 2 things. One was that my hips are a size or 2 larger than the top half of my body, so I knew I would want to add some extra A-line increases to increase to a larger size on the bottom, and that would use more yarn. And also I just knew that I tend to like sweaters a little longer than is really in fashion these days. So I knew I would also want a little extra length. So I'll show you the length that I got. So you can see there's a bit of an A-line shape, although when my arms are down, it doesn't really look A-line so much as it just looks like it's not tight on my hips. It's a length that I enjoy with jeans. If it was just a couple inches longer, I think I would also wear leggings with it. But at this length, just for my personal comfort, it's not like a rule or anything, but just for me, I feel better wearing jeans. One thing you can also see is this was my first time using variegated yarn, and I knew that you're supposed to alternate skeins, and I did. All down here, I alternated skeins. When I did the bust darts, alternating skeins seemed like a lot of bother, so I didn't. Also, when I did the top part of the yoke, alternating skeins seemed like a bother, so I didn't. I alternated a little bit in here. And I love the sweater. I'm in love with it. But you can totally tell where I didn't alternate skeins. There's like a little Batman dark mask around my bust area, a little bit up there. Also towards the end, I ran out of my second skein and I only had 1 skein left, and you can see the hem is a little bit darker. But I don't care. I love it. But it was interesting. These are cables. Some of the first cables I've done. I think they turned out fantastic. They were also a lot of fun to knit. One thing that's cool about this pattern that Anne wrote is that it's really designed for someone who maybe doesn't feel so confident in knitting a sweater yet. I think it would be a great pattern for someone knitting their first sweater because she explains it step by step. She includes diagrams to show you what your work on the needles is supposed to look like at certain points. There's a variation where if you don't feel up to trying the cables yet, you can just do ribbing all the way down here, which I think would also look really striking. It's just a really well done pattern. I have a good friend who lives in a different state who is learning how to knit, and I recommended this as her first sweater when she feels ready for that. It's also a great sweater for the climate here in New Mexico because already early March, the highs many days are in the 60s, which means for my big, beautiful, woolly purple sweater that I'm so proud of that I finished last month, it's already a little too warm for that. Wool is breathable. I learned that I can wear that sweater comfortably up to a high of 60, but once the high gets above 60, that sweater's kind of past its usefulness for that temperature. This sweater, however, it's comfortable, I'd say up to the high 60s, maybe even the 70s, I don't know, we'll find out. Partly because it's these elbow length sleeves, partly because the gauge is a little on the loose side for worsted weight yarn, partly because the increases includes these eyelets, so there's a little more breathability there, partly just because I'm discovering people are right when they say wool is breathable. It really is. That big woolly purple sweater that I wore in the last episode, I did not think it would be comfortable up to a high of 60, and I was shocked when I learned that it was. And it's definitely because wool breathes. I just keep falling more and more in love with wool. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's see, as far as knitting the sweater, it was pure pleasure for me until I got to the end of the bust darts. Love doing the yoke, love doing the sleeves, enjoy doing the short rows for the bust darts. Then I got to the part where I was increasing, and that was okay. I kind of liked knitting to the next increase. Plus I did a little math to increase the rate of increases so that it ended up being a little more A-line than the design called for. That was fun. Then I got to the part where I just had to knit straight until I ran out of yarn. That was hard for me. I consider myself an intermediate knitter in that I feel I can tackle just about anything and learn how to do it. I'm not really intimidated by hard patterns anymore. However, where I'm still very much a beginning knitter is I'm just learning about my own brain and how it interacts with these projects. And one of the things I realized about this as I finished up this blossom is that I am at a point where knitting in the round, where nothing else is going on but knitting in the round, is really hard for me. I get bored, I get antsy, I get upset, I get mad, and I really had to hold my own hand to finish it because I knew I wanted to finish sweaters so bad. And I ended up, one of the ways I got myself through it is every inch or so I would put a little dangly pretty progress keeper on it, and by the time I was done there was 10 little beautiful dangly progress keepers because I do collect those. And getting to knit to the point where I would let myself put on a new progress keeper and I would get to pick it out and choose the perfect one, that was enough of a little bit of a dopamine hit that it kept me going. And then once I got to the ribbing, I was fine. First of all, because I was almost done, but also I have realized I much prefer textured knitting to stockinette knitting. I like purling. I realize that's controversial, and I'll tell you there's a way in which I don't like purling, but if it's purling for a 2x2 rib like this, 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits, 2 purls, I enjoy that. I love that. If it's any kind of texture where you just have to do a few purls, I would say up to 10 purls in a row, I am all over that. I love it. What I don't enjoy doing is purling a row of 180 stitches, mainly because I knit continental, and a lot of you might know that's where your yarn's draped over your left hand. And a lot of you might know that purling continental is a little awkward. I have developed a way that works for me, that works for say 10 stitches. But if I'm purling for 100 stitches, my yarn tensioning starts getting weird and it eventually falls off my finger, and then I have to reposition it and purl some more until it falls off my finger again. I get super irritated with that. But textured knitting is my jam. Stockinette knitting is nice for certain circumstances. Like I love stockinette knitting when I'm in a meeting where I really don't have any brain space to pay towards my knitting, but I need it as a fidget. Then stockinette knitting is beautiful. But for my sort of more mindful sitting down, knitting to knit knitting, I really want to do something. I want a cable, I want some texture. Maybe I want to learn color work. I want to do something that keeps me going. And that is something I didn't realize about myself before, and it's useful to know because it helped me to get myself through the part of the sweater that my brain wanted to walk away from, and it's helping me in planning my future projects. Speaking of stockinette knitting, I have another finished object. Some of you might guess this is a very famous hat pattern, the Mistleboro hat by Isolde Teague. This is the first one I've ever done, and I finished it right before Valentine's Day. My goal had been to finish the blossom by Valentine's Day, and about 3 days before Valentine's Day, I was like, no, that's not going to happen. I could just tell. I have too much to do. I think I had a sleeve and a half done, and then I needed to finish the body, and I knew I couldn't do that in 3 days. So I kind of stepped back from the sweater just for a few days because I realized I was very close to finishing this hat that I was knitting for my husband. And I was certain that I could do that in just a couple days and then have time to block it. So I finished it up, blocked it, and gave my husband a very nice Valentine's Day gift. He had requested a hat from me. I made him a colorwork hat my first year of knitting. And he likes how it looks, he likes how it fits. I made it from some super itchy yarn, and he's not crazy about itchy yarn on his head, which is fair. So he asked if I could maybe someday make him a not itchy hat. And that's exactly what I did. This is, Anne Valley's name's gonna come up a lot today. This is her yarn. In addition to designing patterns, she designs, or she dyes yarn, hand dyes yarn. It's called Little Skein and the Big Wool, I believe is the name of her yarn dyeing company. And I've been a member of her every other month yarn club basically since I started knitting. And for that club, you get these beautiful colors, all inspired by Anne of Green Gables, all on a base of superwash merino, 20% cashmere, and some nylon fingering weight. And it is beautiful, soft yarn in gorgeous colors. And at this point, I have kind of a little collection of the colors, and I let my husband pick one out, and he picked out this. It looks great on him, and it's not itchy at all. And not only is it beautiful, I was so impressed by how it blocked. When I was knitting it up in circles during meetings, it looked fine, it looked good. I felt good about how this hat was gonna look for him. But like, it was nice. That's how I felt about it. Then I blocked it. And when I saw what the fabric looked like after blocking, I knew I immediately had to pick out another color from my stash of Anne's yarn, and I had to start making one for me immediately, and I did. I forgot to grab it from the other room, but it's another Musselburgh. It's in sort of a lighter minty green color. It's gorgeous. And again, right now I'm working on it. It looks nice, but I now know once I block it, it's gonna be a stunner. And another thing I realized is the Musselburgh really fits a nice niche in my knitting need that I had been filling with socks. And that is, sometimes I need meeting knitting, where I'm just in a meeting and like I said, I need a fidget, but I need to not think about it. And socks are good for that until you get to the heel or until you get to the toe or something where you have to think. And then suddenly I either have to put it down during the meeting or I have to try to do it and deal with the meeting, and I end up making stupid mistakes on the sock. So socks aren't perfect for that. The great thing about this hat is you got to think a little bit for the increases, then you got to think a little bit for the decreases, and then you have this huge territory in the middle that's just boring and knitting in the round stockinette. It would drive me batty to have this be my only project for the long term, but it is awesome to have it as a project in my purse for any time that I need a fidget with my hands without having to use my brain. Great project. And then the hat is great too, so I can see why it's so popular. So one thing I had been doing, I don't think I remembered to mention it during my last podcast, but I actually, inspired by Roxanne Richardson, I've been doing an expanded Finish It February. So Roxanne Richardson does Finish It February every year, where in February she finishes old works in progress or maybe changes a finished object that she feels like needs some improvement or does some mending. And I thought that was a great idea. I did my inventory of works in progress right at the beginning of January. And I thought to myself then, I better do a Finish It February because I've got a lot of works in progress. And then I thought about it some more and I thought, February is not enough. So I did a little self-imposed finish it first 2 months of the year. So January and February, I was purely focused on works in progress, not casting on anything new, with one exception, and a second I'll get to in a little bit. The one exception was right around my birthday, actually on my birthday, I let myself cast on my own Musselburgh hat because it was my birthday and I wanted to give myself a present. And at that point, it felt really great to cast on a little project. But other than that, I haven't cast on any garments, anything. I've just been working on finishing up my works in progress. It's been wildly successful. In January, I finished my giant purple sweater. I also made a pair of pants for Frog, of Frog and Toad fame. And then in February, I finished my blossom, finished my husband's hat, and I also made a lot of progress on some socks I'm working on for my husband, and another project that I'll show you in a bit. And I was really starting to wonder, should I do a Finish It first quarter? And I absolutely should. I have enough works in progress I didn't even get to. I could absolutely spend another month working just on more works in progress, finishing them up. Here's the problem. I didn't want to. I debated about the last 2 weeks of February. I was debating, do I let myself cast something on in March? Do I wait until April? I don't know. And then I just realized I was going to cast something on. This was happening. So, I got ahead of myself a little bit. But first, I will just say before I go backwards in time a little bit, I ended up swatching at the end of February for a new project. But before I talk to you more about that, I want to talk about when I finished the blossom. One thing that was fun about finishing the blossom was not only did I have a beautiful new finished object, but I got to go to my basket of works in progress and pick out the next works in progress to focus on. And I was literally like a little kid running over to the basket like, oh, what am I going to work on next? What am I going to work on next? And I chose two things. One was a wild success. One was also a success, but in a different sort of way. I'll go to the wild success first. This bag holds another Anne Valley pattern. Told you her name was going to come up a lot today. This is the Avonlea Wave Shawl, which is a pattern that she designed, and I started working on it, I don't remember exactly, maybe back in November, maybe even in October. And the reason why I worked on it is when I finished my husband's green sweater, I had a couple skeins of the yarn left, and I loved the yarn so much. It's gorgeous yarn. I just had to make something with it immediately. And I decided I was going to make an all green version of the Avonlea Waves, which is a pattern I had in my library. Then I fell in love with the project, and I was like, oh, this is supposed to be a 2-color shawl. I feel like I want to let it be what it wants to be. So I bought one extra skein of yarn in this beautiful rich brown, same yarn, and it is Forest Lane Fiber Company, Rambouillet woolen spun yarn, sport weight. It's so wonderful. And as you can see, this pattern, you kind of marl it or fade it from the green. I'm doing brown. And then there's this applied lace border. And when I picked this up after I finished the blossom, I had not gotten to the applied lace border yet. I was somewhere in these last rows of brown. So I finished up the brown stockinette, and then ever since I've been working on this beautiful, beautiful lace. I am, I'd say, a little bit more than halfway through the applied lace border. I kind of consider the lace border, I call it the world's fussiest cast off, because that's basically what you're doing. You're going row by row, and then you cast off the rest of the shawl stitch by stitch. So you know how people love their tubular bind offs or whatever. Well, this is your fancy lace bind off. And boy, is it beautiful. So I've been enjoying this. I've learned again that I really like having this kind of knitting. Lace knitting is a pretty new skill for me. I worked really hard last year on developing it. And I did a lot of partial projects. I did a couple things that were lace where I started knitting them to see if I could do the lace. And once I got comfortable with the lace, I looked at the work in progress and I was like, don't actually want the finished object. And then I walked away from it. But I don't consider those projects failures. I was knitting from stash and I was building a skill. But this project I have no intention of walking away from. I really look forward to wearing this. One thing I have learned as I worked on this pretty intensely the last couple weeks is that my happy place is doing the lace repeat 3 times. Like 3 times, I'm like happy, I'm enjoying it. I'm like, oh, lace, awesome, yay, this is so wonderful and mindful. Then if I try to push forward and do a 4th repeat in a row, I'm like, I want to stop, let me stop, please, please, please. And at first I was trying to push through that, and I was like knitting repeat after repeat, feeling kind of mad and frustrated by the end, when at the beginning I'd felt light and joyful. And eventually I decided my goal is 3 repeats a day. So, or maybe 2 sessions, 6 repeats. But my goal is at least once a day to sit down, do those 3 repeats of joy, and then put the project down and work on something else. And that has been working really well for me. Let me show you the second project I pulled out. That was my easier knit. to work on when I had finished my 3 repeats. This is another work in progress. I think I showed it maybe one other time. It is my Trinnigan, designed by Andrea Mowry. It's one of my abandoned works in progress, and when I picked it up after I finished my blossom, I told myself, this is the Trinnigan's final test. I had put it away and put it into dormancy because I just found working on it really tedious. I loved the yarn. I love the green yarn. I love the variegated color changing pink and sort of orange yarn. I like the way it looks, but the doing of it was too boring for me. You know, it's a mosaic pattern, so you're slipping stitches, knitting one way, purling back. This is the project that made me realize I really don't like having to purl for like 250 stitches all in a row. It's not fun for me. And when I picked this back up in February, I said to myself, this is the final test. I'm going to try to see if I can push through and finish this, because I know I will love the finished product and I will wear it. But if I can't finish it, then I'm going to give up on it and I'm going to eventually frog it and repurpose the yarn. And what I decided after a couple weeks of trying to work on this thing is it's failed the test. The Trinnigan will never come to be. The yarn, however, is going to live on. And I knew it was the right decision because I immediately started getting excited about what I was going to do with the yarn. First of all, this yarn is some of Anne's yarn. It's worsted weight, tarry, green, dyed this beautiful green color. And I immediately thought to myself, this would make a gorgeous blossom. And not only that, I was poking through my stash yesterday and I realized I don't have 6 skeins of this yarn, I have 8. And you know what that means? That means that when I get around to making my second blossom, I can make it longer than this one, which means that this green blossom will be one that I can wear with my wool leggings in the winter and just be a woolly, happy, warm woman. So that's my plan for this green yarn, is eventually, hopefully by next winter, I'm going to make another blossom, and I'm going to get myself through that part where I'm just knitting around and around, and I'm going to make something I wear with leggings. I've even wondered, I was thinking about how hard it was for me to finish the plain stockinette part. I wonder about taking this cable and restarting it somewhere under the arm and having it go down each side of the sweater. I think that might be doable. I think it might look really cool, and I think it might keep me happy so that I can make this tunic length without getting too mad. So that's kind of my plan. And then this beautiful yarn, which I checked, and I have 4 skeins of this. This is, let's see if, I'm gonna look at my notes, see if I can remember what kind of yarn this is. Oh, I didn't write it down. It's fiber cast. I'll put it in the notes because I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's a little mill, I think in Vermont, run by 2 women. They have a great podcast that I like to watch sometimes, and this is one of their colorways. I've got 4 skeins of it, and this would be a beautiful traveler shawl designed by Andrea Mowry, or this is a pattern called the Lindahl shawl, which is actually designed to be used with this exact yarn. I printed it out for you so you could see how cool it is. So that's another thing I could do with this pink yarn. I could make a Lindahl. I think it would look so cool. You do need a second just sort of like plain color to go with the variegated. And actually there's a project I'm working on right now where I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have some extra skeins of DK weight yarn when I'm done. And those skeins may well get put into making a Lindahl with this yarn. And once I realized I was excited about my alternate plans for this yarn, I knew that it was the right move to put this to bed. And that is when I started swatching. Remember those cardigan dreams I talked about last time? I decided I wanted to make a garter stitch cardigan, which meant I had 2 choices, and I am planning to make both of these cardigans eventually. But one of them was the Riggies cardigan, designed by Gudrun Johnson. Here's a picture of the back of the Riggies. And I'll show you picture of the front. There we go. The front of the Riggies. I just love this. It's a big cocoon of an oversized cardigan, and I absolutely know I would love wearing this. So the Riggies is one. I don't have a picture of the other, but I think it's a little more well known right now. Oh, the Riggies is from Grand Shetland Adventure Knits, which is a book I am really enjoying. And the other one is the Midland cardigan, designed by, I'm blanking on the name, Laura Penrose Knits. She designed the Midland cardigan. So I was really debating, do I do a Riggies, do I do a Midland? I started swatching, and what I eventually decided before I started swatching was I thought, you know what, I am gonna do a Riggies in this beautiful green yarn. This is John Arbon's Appledore DK, and I swatched with some number 9 needles, and then I took it down to some number 8 needles, and I love how subtle the green is. There's these sort of streaks of yellow and darker and lighter green, but I really felt like it wasn't right for the Riggies. Like, I really had my heart set on a meaty Riggies, like not something that's super drapey. This is very drapey, but something like that you can chew on. That is what I wanted. And this wasn't quite it. Even though I was able to meet gauge, this wasn't the Riggies that I wanted. And then I remembered that last fall I knit a pair of mitts with some Rama yarn and DK weight, Stricky yarn, I think. And as I knit those mitts in gray, I thought to myself, I want a sweater knit out of this exact yarn in brown. And so I pulled out that sweater quantity that I had and I started swatching, and this is where I fell in love. I started by swatching with number 9, decided that I liked the 8 a little bit better and it was a little closer to gauge, and this is what I cast on a Riggies cardigan in. You can just see it's a little bit chunkier. Even though both of these yarns are DK, this one is absolutely a little lighter and this one's a little chunkier. And this yarn will not go to waste because Laura Penrose designed the Midland cardigan in this exact yarn base, which means that this is absolutely going to work great for a Midland when I get around to making that. And for now, I'm kind of happy that I have gone back to some yarn that was in a little deeper stash. This yarn was brand new. I bought it for my birthday month. This yarn I've had for maybe 6 months. And it's time for it to get to become something that I love. So I got really excited about that. I didn't quite make row gauge on the swatch that I decided was going to work. I was off a little bit. So I actually went and did some math. And I discovered that this cardigan, if I made it with my row gauge, was going to turn out 2 inches smaller in circumference than the pattern as is, which was actually completely fine because the pattern, it only comes in 3 sizes and they have big leaps in between them. And size 2 was definitely not as much ease as I wanted. I want a cardigan with a lot of ease. Size 3 was a little more ease than I wanted, but I figured that was probably the better choice because I knew I didn't want a too small cardigan. So actually size 3 knitted so that it's 2 inches smaller, that is fine. I didn't want those 2 inches anyway. So I think it's gonna be great when it's done. And then I meant to cast it on March 1st, that's yesterday. I was so excited. The second I stopped doing my math, I started casting on. It was the last day of February, and I only realized I hadn't intended to do that when I was done knitting like the 2nd row. So anyway, I broke my rule to myself and I cast on 1 day early. I of course don't care. So this is what I've got so far. This is the left front of the cardigan. It's knit in pieces and then you seam them together. I don't mind seaming, so that is not a problem for me. And then it's knit up and down. You can see it's going to be super long. And I'm in love with this project. I love working with this yarn. I'd forgotten how compelling I find the Rama Norwegian wool. I love the color. I love the texture. It's just a really fun, slightly mindless knit for when I want that. And then when I want something a little more mindful, I pull out my shawl and that has been a great combo the last few days. Really, really happy with it. And that brings me to future plans. I think moving forward, I'm going to experiment with mostly having 2 main projects at a time. One of them more mindful, whether it be lace or cables or color work, and one of them a little more mindless, whether it be stockinette or garter stitch or just something, or some kind of basic texture where I don't have to do a lot of figuring. And I'm going to see how that goes. And it's going to be fine that I'm working on just one major project at a time instead of focusing on just finishing one sweater like I was in January and February, because I've decided I'm going to mostly skip summer knitting. Last year, I tried to really focus on summer knitting because I was like, you know, that makes more sense. I live in New Mexico. There's about 4 to 5 months where you can wear winter type sweaters and the rest of the time you wear summer knits. The problem is I don't love working on summer knits, and I kind of have yet to make one that I love wearing. You know, no beef on the patterns. They're beautiful patterns, but this is what compels me right now. I want to knit warm, woolly things, and you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. And when next winter rolls around, if I have, you know, 8 new sweaters to wear for those 4 to 5 months, I am gonna really just revel in them for those 4 to 5 months. It's gonna be great. So that's kind of my plan, is to stick with winter weight knitting unless I change my mind. I don't care if I change my mind. I've got plenty of sweater or t-shirt weight quantities of summer fibers in my stash, so if I at some point am like, I have to knit a tank top, I can do that. That is not a problem. But I'm going to try just continuing on knitting with wool, but it means that I can kind of slow my pace a little bit because I'm not going to be able to wear most of these things until, say, late October anyway, so I got some time. So if I'm working on a couple of projects at once, that's cool. One thing I might do, if I have an urge for some summer knitting, and also if I just want to wear something that I made, is I've got 4 beautiful skeins that are here in my house because of insomnia. They're a beautiful base. It's the Cozy Posy Yarn Company in 4 different colors. This is called the Lush Lino base. It's fingering weight, 65% silk, 35% linen. I learned about this yarn on a podcast in the middle of the night when I was having insomnia at some point, and I have since made a hard and fast rule, which is that if I am up at 3 a.m. with insomnia, I do not buy anything. No purchasing things on the internet. No. No, 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 no. These were bought at 3 a.m. before I made that rule. I saw some people on a podcast raving about this yarn base. I immediately went to the website. I discovered that the only skeins this dyer had were just single skeins of these 4 colors. There weren't t-shirt quantities of anything. So I bought all 4 of them. And then they arrived, and I was like, these are beautiful. This is a beautiful base. What the heck am I going to do with these 4 skeins? And that was actually what caused me to make the rule. I was like, okay, I should not be spending money I don't have in the middle of the night on plans that don't make sense, clearly. But I don't want these to go to waste, and I do think it's a beautiful base. I am thinking 1 or more of these over the summer, as many as is fun for me, are going to turn into little lacy, intricate 1 skein shawls or scarves that I can kind of, you know, wrap jauntily around my neck, even when it's 100 degrees, and feel stylish and happy. So I don't know which is the first one I'm going to cast on, but when I finish my current woolly shawl, I may well cast on one of these 4. I've been scoping out little 1 skein lacy projects. If you have one you love, please let me know about it. But I think my second sort of intricate project may well be one of these, so that it's waiting for me when the weather gets too hot to wear wool. Okay. Another thing I've been doing is using this thing I've been looking down at the whole time. I'm still using my portfolio. One of the things I realized as I was thinking about why do I have so many works in progress and why am I finishing so few of them, is I realized that's like an ADHD brain thing. constantly getting distracted by new ideas, and then I am afraid I am going to forget my idea. So I immediately buy the yarn for it and cast it on. And then I end up with a gazillion projects, none of which are finished. And that would be fine. That's not an issue, except that I love finished objects and I crave the rush of joy I get from a finished object. And I was really mad when it was December this year and I did not have one single new sweater that I had made in the last year that I could wear in the cold weather. I was like, what is wrong with me? I was so frustrated. And that's why I really pushed and forced myself to knit monogamously so that now I have 2 finished sweaters that I can wear, or at least I could wear when it was cold enough. But yeah, so I was like, okay, how do I handle this? Because having ideas is great. I love the rush of the idea, but I can't spend all this money on yarn, and also I can't just cast on everything and never finish anything. And that is where this comes in. Now when I have a great idea, I run over to this notebook and I write it down. It sounds really simple, but it feels revolutionary. So I've got all sorts of lists, and I'm trying really hard not to buy much new yarn at this point. I bought some new yarn for my birthday month, but after that, I'm gonna try to hold off because I've got plenty of sweater quantities here. So what I do when I come across a pattern that really inspires me is I try to think, is there a yarn I already have in my stash that would work for this? And there often is. And then I just write it down. I want to make this pattern with this yarn, and then I relax. It's like the thing that's burning in my brain, what makes me feel like I have to cast it on, that goes away. Because I know I'm not going to forget about it because it's written down in my creative portfolio, and that when I'm ready for it, I will go back to it. An example is Stephen West came out with a new base recently. It's a bulky yarn base. And to go along with that bulky yarn base, he also came out with some bulky patterns. And one of his chunky or bulky shawls, I really liked it. And I was like, I want to make this. I want to make it from this one yarn. I put some of his new yarn, the West Knits wool, in my shopping cart, and I was really close to buying it. Then I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? You said you weren't going to buy more yarn. And not only that, you have other projects you're working on. You're not going to cast this on right away. If you buy this yarn, it's just going to go in your stash, and who knows when you're going to make this cool shawl. And then I thought about some more, and I thought, do I have anything in my stash that would work? And I immediately realized I did, because I've got some nudiden in maybe 5 different colors. Not necessarily sweater quantities in all of them, but quantities enough that there are several colors where I could hold them double and make this Stephen West chunky shawl using nudiden yarn that's in my stash that does not have a specific purpose yet. So that's perfect. And then I wrote it down here so that if I am inspired to make a super chunky shawl like the one I was admiring, I can remind myself what the pattern's called in here. I can remind myself I was going to make it with some of my nudiden. So that's been working really well for me. And I think that has gotten me to the end of what I wanted to talk about. I am just using my creative fiber crafting time to re-energize. Re-energiate is not a word. Re-energizing is a word, and that's what it does. It calms me down. When I start to panic, I take a big noisy breath. And I start knitting. Or I didn't talk about it much today, but sometimes I start spinning. I do something creative, it calms me, and then I can get to work in other ways. And I'm doing my best to help myself, people I love, people in my sphere, people out of my sphere who I still care about. I'm doing what I can. And I hope that you are doing what you can as well. And remember that part of how you do what you can is you keep yourself well. And you keep yourself well by actively pursuing joy in whatever form that takes. If you have gotten to the end of this podcast, I strongly suspect for you also, this joy often takes form in wool and things you do with wool. So don't feel embarrassed about that. Don't feel like you're wasting your time. You are not. You are making yourself strong and happy and joyful and mighty. And right now, that is what we need. So be well. Please like, subscribe, comment, all of those good things. This is a teeny, teeny, tiny little channel. Like, I have like a micro platform here. I would love to have more people who relate to what I'm saying watching this, and the only way that can happen is if any of you who have found your way here interact with it in the various YouTube ways that you do, and maybe I show up in some more people's feeds. Thank you so much. I appreciate you wherever you are, whoever you are, and yeah, just thank you. I'll talk to you again as soon as I can.